think we have everyone who did register to for this recording has signed in. I have muted everyone's phone for now. I'll unmute it just shortly to see if there's any questions about the first presentation. I did get one question, and before we jump into the second part of New Year Roll, I thought I could share some information about that. So again, we are recording this webinar, and at the end of it, we will provide everyone who attended the URL to view it in the future. One final thing that I will add to is we will be selecting one registrant from this presentation and offering them free 2-hour consulting to go over anything they want, if it's whether or not be packaging, this tracking stuff, or so forth. So at the end of this, we will be announcing the winner, who will receive 2 free hours of kind of Banner Financially Consulting support if they choose to use it. Okay, so I thought that would be a nice little incentive for those of you to stay on. We will only, the winner has to be registered to the end of this, can't sign off early in order to be eligible to get that. So we'll get started now with the presentation. So again, we're going to go over New Year Roll. The last time we did this 2 weeks ago here, we covered institutional setup, tracking groups and requirements, and getting students to acknowledge the policies that we have for financial aid. What to take from that last session is that accuracy and delivery of New Year setup is really important. You want to start it early. You want to review your strengths and weaknesses or opportunities for that year, because you want to get it right that first time. It's so critical because if you get something wrong and you have to reset up, it may impact anybody that you already awarded. There's tracking groups and so forth. You want to reduce the need for your financial aid staff to review the litany of items that we have to, whether that be verifications or conflicting information, someone's report of their taxes paid equals AGI. Banner can help reduce the amount of time that you have to spend babysitting those files. And we want you to kind of look at those opportunities that are there so that when it comes time to reviewing those applications or to informing those students, you inform them at the get-go that they have more information or all the information they need in order to resolve the information. So again, they get it done the first time and you only have to touch the file once. And then finally, disclosure information. We noticed that the Department of Education is starting to do a lot more disclosure information. We have the net price calculator about how much it's going to cost them to go there. They want us to make sure that the students understand all their terms and conditions, have that shopping cart that came up from NASPA. We also have the compliance components, capturing Title IV authorizations electronically. Those where if we can get them to do it at the time that they're accepting their award, it makes our jobs and the lives of our student accounts counterparts better. So the one thing that came out from the last session, and I got a couple emails, was the population selection that we used to kind of cancel the requirements. Many people or schools have created their own complex SQLs in order to do that. And what I tend to do is not have to do these add-ons, not have to kind of worry about getting something else or having significant IT support in order to accomplish this same task. So we've certainly recommended that using the baseline product to do so. If you have a job scheduler, this makes this a lot easier. But I typically tag on to the data load process, the part of doing tracking groups and batch posting C flags and requirements. So the registrant from the last session wanted to know how do we develop that population selection. They asked us to kind of share some information about it. So with that in mind, those canceling pop cells that we have from Roar Post, that if we identify that missing signatures on the FAFSA is missing, or the student has a citizenship or a selective service issue, I've helped build all these population selections, if you will, to identify the requirement exists, but the student has now resolved it on a subsequent ISER, or they're female. And we don't want to have to worry about capturing that later. So we've kind of got an automated way letting the system identify what's available to that student, so you don't have to worry about collecting it or getting it later or getting the student upset. So what I've done here is taken a C flag or a reject that was reported on the initial FAFSA application, and you update RARAC accordingly if you use WARPOST to do so. What happens here is that if that's been resolved in a subsequent ICER, many of us know about the FAFSA signature pages. What I tend to do is tell them that, you've been selected for verification or you're missing a signature page all on the get-go versus doing signature page, waiting for that second FAFSA to come back in, then to tell them they're eligible for FAFSA for verification, in which now you need to collect new documentation to move forward. So if it's been resolved in a subsequent ICER, what we would take is two different population selections. One that says the requirement exists on RARAC in a non-satisfied state, and that the C flag has been resolved on that ICER. We use that intersect, the overlap between the two circles, if you will, to say, okay, those are the students that overlap. We want to cancel those requirements. And I recommend, instead of just using a generic satisfied indicator to say it was satisfied, to use a new status code that indicates it was resolved on a subsequent ICER. That way, when you or another counselor is looking at that student's document tracking screen, you truly understand how that requirement got satisfied. It wasn't done manually, it was done by the system. So what we have here, this is the screenshot I showed about. This is one where it indicates that a citizenship requirement was added to the student's account because the C flag existed. This population selection does that intersect. It says the citizenship issue exists on RARAC. However, the C flag doesn't exist anymore. So let's waive that citizenship requirement. So as you can see, it uses GLB data to run this rule to select the student's PITMs, and then what it does is it uses, and the next slide here will show you the citizenship resolve. Just look to see if the requirement exists in a non-satisfied state on RARAC. It's simple. You can use this same format to identify FAFSA signature pages, selective service, NSLDS issues, and so forth to determine that it does exist. And all we do is then we use the same population selection. No C flag exists now on the current ICER, and we intersect this no C flag pop cell with all the other population selections that we have to identify students that no longer have that C flag on their current application. And with that, then we use WARPOST, okay, to satisfy the requirement on RARAC. I've highlighted, it sees code to post of a number 4. What that translates to is it's resolved by new FAFSA information. That way the student understands what that description is. You understand that it's been resolved not by a staff member, not by any student interaction, but that you have a new ICER that was pushed to you by either NSLDS updating something or the student resolving it themselves. That way you don't have to babysit this process anymore. Pretty simple in terms of how we designed it. It's using all the baseline functionality to accomplish something that many of the job schedulers or you would need IT support for. Okay, and again, you can use many of these rules. I'll go back here and show you the requirement one. You can put in just a different requirements that satisfy citizenship, that satisfy selective service. Something that means something specific to your institution, and then just intersect it against this no C flag one, and it would resolve the issue. Now, this is for the C flag. This is no reject like missing a signature page or taxes paid equal to AGI, things like that. Then you would use a different different population to identify the reject has been resolved. But this is kind of just give you an idea of how you can use baseline without needing substantial IT support to do it. So hopefully that answers the question that from the last session for everybody that was able to attend. And for those of you who are not able to attend, hopefully you got the PowerPoint and the URL for the video recording. And if you have any questions, what I'm going to do right now before we start this session is to unmute everyone's phone and give you an opportunity to ask questions about the last presentation now that you've had a week to almost 2 weeks to think about what we discussed on that session. So the phones are open. I have unmuted everybody. Is there any questions from that first session you wanted me to review with you?
Oh.
Ray, yes, I have a question.
Yep.
Hi, this is Katrina Rogers from Emerson College. I just had a quick question to confirm. Do we need to run the ROP roll process before installing the early decision release? That has to be completed first?
Yes. In many cases, that had to, because the aid year has to be there for them to install the new INS functionality. Many cases, before SunGuard, or now Ellucian, delivered that functionality in our ROP role to create the new aid year, your IT support had to do an insert onto the ROB INFT table. But yes, now that you have the functionality, it needs to be created in order for you to install it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Well, hopefully that last session was good for you. We will take any comments, suggestions about other webinars that you'd like to see us to cover, whether that be satisfactory progress, a more in-depth one on those terms and conditions and how you can build them and tailor them to students, the Title IV authorizations. Nothing is off the table, and if you'd like to see us do something, I welcome any comments or suggestions to us. So if there are no other questions, we will now continue with the second part of the New Year Roll webinar. Was there a question? All right. I'm going to mute everyone's phone, and we'll continue. We'll do strategic breaks throughout this in case you have any questions as we review them. So what we're going to cover here is the more detailed one about New Year Roll. I have glossed over a few items like reefer defer and ROR, TPRD, because, again, I think they're very systematic, and I think we all know those pieces. So this is going to get into kind of the nitty-gritty on how to use that fund management and packaging to potentially make our lives a lot easier when it comes to awarding those students. So we're going to cover fund management, packaging, messaging, because I think that's a really big piece, and if you want to extract out certain key information to the students, for example, say you want to award a loan, but you want to make sure those first-year students understand that they have to need to do stuff, versus hard-coding it into your award letter, you can have it pull as a variable on your award letter template, so that way if you don't award loans to certain students or you don't award certain funds to certain students, such as you get state grants that go to in-state but no state grants to out-of-state students, rather than delivering all the same information on a hard-coded template, we can use messaging to make our lives a little easier. And then we're going to cover self-service. I do have a couple screen prints in here that show how the messaging works, how the terms and conditions pieces work, and so forth, so you can see it if you've never seen some components of self-service. So for RFR management, there's a bunch of pieces on this. The major ones here are that fund control, the packaging setup, and we're going to go over this. This equity indicator that you see on that middle. It's kind of an important piece. If you have use no-levits, if you work with enrollment research, if you work with the litany of enrollment research companies that provide you your packaging strategy, this enrollment indicator, this equity target piece, can dramatically improve your awarding practices, so that way you'll hit your target and award students correctly based on the matrix that you have available. And then the disbursement setup provides some unique setup opportunities to control what will disperse, what won't disperse. This new attending hours, not new, but I think it's new for a lot of individuals. This enrollment rule, which is brand new to a lot of us, and you're looking at the eligibility pieces on that. So we're going to go piece by piece on those, and some of this may be old hat, some of this may be new. And I do welcome, again, any questions. I do have my colleague here, Russ, who's monitoring the chat room here. So if you have any questions that you would like to shoot us, feel free to do so, and Russ will answer them. If there's something he feels we should open it up for a larger discussion, we'll do that as well. So with RFR management, that first page always is the critical one. And if you don't use this, there is a banner canned report, RFR BUDG, that I use a lot to when you're doing New Year Roll. I print that out first before I even start doing RFR MGMT. And the reason for that is that report provides me what we actually spent last year, what we used for an overcommitment, so that way we can determine whether or not we want to increase our overcommitment allotment. And that overcommitment for many of our new colleagues here is just the target to award up to. We know that we're not going to be able to award $10 million in this scenario. And yes, I understand I'm using Pell. I'm just using it as an example here because everybody has Pell. But we just don't have the budget to be able to support awarding $10 million of a particular fund. What this means, though, is we realize we will have to extend a certain amount of offers to those students knowing that they will melt, that they will not come to your institution. But you won't have to always constantly increase your budget allotment, and that budget allocated item is really what your budget is. That's the target you're looking to hit, okay? So when many of you sometimes overcommit your budget or overspent your budget allocated, you see that disbursement lock in the middle of the tabs there. That'll lock on you and prevent you from dispersing any more funding until that budget issue has been resolved. I like to recommend that if you have deal with some enrollment managers who know that you want to have a certain packaging strategy, well, if you have those different buckets in packaging, well, how many students in each bucket do you really need to matriculate in order to have your class? And that can help kind of design really what your overcommitment is going to be, how many offers are you going to award in bucket 1 versus bucket 2, and then you can extrapolate it out what the total amount for that offer is. So that gets a little more into it, but I've had many conversations this year with vice presidents, enrollment managers, and so forth to talk about how can we control better spending. There is recently a few institutions have overspent significantly, and the more we understand how to utilize this funding, this available to offer in the budget allocated item, the better it's going to be to ensure we're going to hit our discount rates, to hit our targets for enrollment and targets for awarding. The next one is this packaging tab, and it provides a lot of new features on there that came out last year, and I use quite a bit. I'm going to start with the web accept and web decline item. And this came out when SunGard at that time delivered the new award letter feature in self-service. This allows us to create different award status codes so that we know when a student goes online to self-service and accepts a loan or declines a loan, that we know the student initiated this. And the reason why, again, I like using different codes, here it's Pell. Pell makes no difference, but if it was an institutional fund or a loan fund, it makes a bigger difference. But if we're a loan fund, I have like WACC for web accept and WDEC for web decline. And the reason why I like doing that is for the right to cancel notification. The regulations for the right to cancel notification are pretty simple, that if you do passive confirmation, meaning you accept it on the student's behalf, you have 7 days from the day that disbursement hit the student account to inform them. And if you get busy during the week, if you're out and so forth, you've really handicapped yourself to get the right to cancel notifications out. If you do after confirmation, you have 30 days to send out that right to cancel notification. So you dramatically improve your odds of staying compliant if you do the active confirmation. So I like knowing that the student has done it. I like being able to tell the auditor that I know the student has accepted it online. Yes, you certainly can accept it yourself on the student's behalf, but you use your generic status code, your accept status code versus the online one to know that you have made that decision on the student's behalf. And there's a way to record that. And we'll go down in that same column, the auto packaging, the automated scheduling, and the auto acceptance piece. If you aren't auto packaging, this is a great opportunity to start learning about auto packaging because it can dramatically improve your experience, the delivery of the awards to those students, especially if you have a policy that you can automate. And we'll go through this after we go through the funding piece of how the easiest way is to think about doing auto packaging. But the auto packaging indicator is just that fund is able to be used in the auto packaging process. That's all you're doing is saying, yes, we can use that. The auto scheduling, if you ever change your aid period on Rababud, this allows that fund to automatically be redistributed throughout that new period. So many community colleges typically go with a fall-spring award, and then as the semester goes on, they'll add summer to it. The reason for that is they want to be able to reallocate Pell. If they only use 3/4 of their Pell in the fall semester, they want that student to be able to use the remaining portion of their Pell in summer if that student chooses to enroll. Well, this allows that fund to automatically be rescheduled assuming you set up a REFR-DEFR. As I mentioned in the last session, I had a school in Florida that was trying to do this and redistribute a loan, but they didn't set up RFR, DEFA with the right percentages. They left their fall, spring, summer period set up with a 50% distribution for fall and spring, and that award wasn't to be reallocated because they still set up that period with the fall, spring distribution, so to speak. But once they did that, it allowed the Pell to redistribute any remaining eligibility to that summer semester. The auto acceptance piece, typically I make the decision that says any gift aid, free money, that we're automatically going to auto accept. There isn't a requirement for us to do a right to cancel notification on gift aid because it's free money. So I use that auto acceptance piece. It is dovetailed, tied to, if you look at the very last column, it's the last box in the second red box there, web accept flag, that you would, if you're not going to auto accept a fund and you want the student to make a decision for you, that you would uncheck that auto acceptance box and check off the web accept flag. That enables the feature in self-service to require the student to make a decision about do I want this loan, do I want this work study, and so forth. There are some schools who take a much more conservative approach to say you must accept everything on your award. Again, I take a little lax approach there and only require them to accept loan or work study eligibility because we don't want to require them to debt without doing that. One thing I do caution is plus loans for parents, because the student is the one who's accepting the loan on their behalf if you have the student accept the loan in self-service. I had a client who a couple years ago that was awarding the plus loans as part of the package and then having the student accept the loan in self-service. Big concern there is that the student was the one acknowledging this parent's debt, not the parent. So just be careful when you're looking at that. If it's a parent loan that you're going to have to award and you want someone to acknowledge it, you got to make sure who's acknowledging it is their appropriate borrower. Same line on those: override need, override cost of ed, override SAP, and override requirement will be dependent upon the fund that you have. If it's an institutional program, certainly you really probably don't care about SAP. Maybe you do. Maybe you don't care about overriding need like a merit fund, and so forth. So this is going to be completely up to you depending on the type of fund that it's going to be. We go to that middle column there, and I've highlighted some of the more appropriate pieces here. The award using estimated EFC, replace EFC, reduce need, loan process, and need analysis. The award using an estimated EFC, I like checking this off and utilizing this functionality because there are some first-year students who just get it wrong sometimes, but we can force an EFC either using Renana, Renapper, any of the needs analysis forms really, in determining an estimated EFC. For example, if a student's missing a signature page, you can take the hard line approach to say if there's a missing signature, we're not going to package you until we get a valid student aid report. Some enrollment managers, admissions people would like to say, you know what, the family contribution is not going to change on that particular student. So all they need to do is sign their FAFSA to get an official FAFSA. So with that said, if the student's just missing a signature page, we can force an estimated EFC, package them, but put a requirement onto the requirement screen that prevents that aid from memoing to the bill from dispersing to the account until they sign or you get a valid ISR on record. For those first-year students, community colleges, where you really want to at least provide them the best award information available. Again, if it's just missing a signature page, the only issue is that you need the signature. All the data elements are accurate and so forth, so you can at least determine an estimated award for them using that estimated award EFC indicator. The replace EFC, the reduced need pieces are just like that. Most of your gift aid, most of your need-based funds are all going to reduce the student's financial need. If it's a PLUS loan or unsubsidized staff road loan, or campus work study, not institutional work study, some of them treat them differently, all potentially would replace that family contribution. So that's really important that they're checked off appropriately. And some of you who've experienced this in the past, if you don't check them off at all, it will prevent all aid from dispersing to the student's account until you resolve what kind of fund that fund should be. The loan process one is just indicating that the loan will be processed through either Rapid-Log or Rapid-ELAP for alternative loans, and so forth. And needs analysis means that you actually have to calculate need before this fund will be awarded. I typically don't check that off because there's many students who aren't selected for verification. So why should we have to kick off need in order for us to package them? You can certainly do so, but it's just an extra step that we make ourselves crazy about if we have to. This equity fund, the account in NCAA, and for those of you, I'll go to the second one there, who are not using the athletic module inside Banner, this is a nice little feature. It just indicates that this fund will impact the equivalencies and help us determining by each fund, each sport, how much has been spent. There are two forms, and I don't have them slides here, but if you want to look at them, the actual student sport form is RAA, Sam, Pat, Tom, Matthew, so SPTM. And that form is student-specific and sport-specific. That indicates that whatever is awarded on RAP Award, you can automatically bring it over to that form to keep track of that athlete. Are they a red shirt? Are they a recruited athlete? Are they a walk-on? The different types that you would need for your NCAA CAI reporting. The eligible to roll is great for your merit scholarship funds, your endowed funds that you might want to roll from year to year, and there's a job, the RPRAROL, that allows you to roll funds from semesters from year to year without doing that. It will also use raw roll when you are doing the roll. So if the student doesn't meet the GPA requirements on your merit scholarship, doesn't meet the restrictions on your endowed fund, as you try to do the roll from year to year, if a student fails the awarding rule, it won't award that fund when you try to do the roll. So it's a nice little feature. The award letter indicator is just that. It means that this fund, anytime it changes, you make a change on RAP Award, or anybody makes a change on RAP Award, it would check it off, and that would provide the indicator to you to let your staff know that this student needs to get an updated award. I like this feature because then you can do a sweep using GLB data to grab everybody you've made a change on, and then you can notify them all. That's got to be dovetailed with using messaging to the student, and I have a few slides towards the end of this about how we utilize row message more effectively. This messages can be pulled on emails that are sent to students and let them know exactly what has changed on their award, so that way you don't have to be hassled by them calling and asking why did this change, what's going on, and so forth. It at least provides some more disclosure information to that student about their award eligibility. That equity fund is important because you can indicate what funds would be calculated when you're looking at how much gift aid you are willing to offer a student. So say you have all these different buckets, and each bucket has different percentages of need being met and different academic ratings. Well, what we can do here is use this indicator that says all these funds would help equal that percentage of gift aid. And once we hit that percentage of gift aid, it will stop awarding the funds. And that's what this equity indicator does. We could spend a whole, another hour just on packaging and getting automatic packaging set up, so that way when you do something like that, it'll look at the student's cost of attendance, look at their demonstrated financial need, and award that student appropriately up to the ceiling in which you think is comfortable based on your packaging strategy. Then it's a nice feature, and I've worked with 5 schools now that use that feature, and it awards them to the penny, which is great. And both schools I worked at, one school reduced their discount rate by a whole 2%, and another one reduced their discount rate by a whole 9%. It just goes to show you that how different it is if you manually package somebody, and if that's your strategy is, how ineffective sometimes it is, and how people misinterpret what the policy should be. Yes, there'll be exceptions to your policy, but on the whole, it contributes to overwarding significantly. I'm not saying auto packaging is perfect either, but these two institutions dramatically improve their revenue stream considerably just by making sure that they packaged everybody consistently. Then when we go down a little more onto the right-hand side again, that round award, round schedule, essentially that round award and round schedule just allows you to say if you want to round to near its 50th dollar, so instead of having somebody get $10,023 because that's the percentage of gift aid, you can say, you know what, if it's not to the nearest $50, don't give them the $10,023, just do $10,000. Or you can do the nearest hundredth. If you don't like seeing a $79 award, you can say if it's less than $100, don't award it. So you can determine how you want to round that award when you're doing auto packaging. The round schedule, same thing. You can truncate the dollars. You can round dollars, round to the nearest cents, and so forth. The memo credit, the disperse indicators just mean that, again, if it's a memo, do you want that fund to memo if the student is able to get the anticipated credit? For me, I have started moving a lot away from this whole concept of memo versus authorized aid, just for the simple fact that, if we're letting it memo and we're restricting aid from showing up on the bill by using tracking, the RareX screen, if once it's been, a student has done everything, regardless if it's a memo or regardless if it's an anticipated credit, it's still anticipated financial aid that's going to reduce from the bill. And with direct loans, it's really moved away from this whole concept of authorized aid versus anticipated aid. Again, that's the way I view it, and I'd like to see SunGard in some way or Lucian in some way kind of change their terminology so that way it makes more sense for our business practices. Dispersed, this means the fund can be dispersed. ACG SMART, no longer relevant here. And the teach grant level just indicates if it's a graduate or undergraduate. Now, there's also, for many of our Ivy League schools or Tier 1 schools, they have this self-help percentage, and that can be used when you're doing auto packaging as well. It's a percentage of that you want to reduce the self-help by. For our loan funds, down at the bottom, the loan options and the loan options self-service. Again, SunGard or Lucian, again, has delivered a lot more functionality inside Banner for us to make changes to Banner self-service without requiring them to go into WebTailor or without requiring them to make any changes to the baseline product. We now have a lot of this functionality at our fingertips, and we don't have to go through IT to do so. They really pushed it down and empowered us to be responsible for a lot of our data that we're shifting out to self-service. So that loan options tab just indicates, what type of a loan fund it is, if it's direct loan, if it's an electronic, if it's a private loan, so forth. The one on the right-hand side for your loans, the rebate, the interest rate, loan fee, that's the critical one. I think many of us went through that transition between June 30th and July 1 last year when the rebate went away. That's critical. If the rebate or the origination fee is wrong on those funds when you originate them, it'll reject the Department of Ed. And to go back just a little tidbit of information, with the Department of Ed, it is not when the loan is originated, it's when the loan disperses if the origination is correct. So if you originate a loan on, say, June 20th, but it's not anticipated to disperse until July 8th, for whatever reason, it's got to use the new origination fee for that year, not the one on which you originated on. So I went through that and learned that the hard way this year that it's not when the loan is originated, it's when the loan disperses. So that covers the whole packaging tab, and I know there's a lot of content in there. But this other feature on the disbursement tab provides us a lot of functionality here that I wasn't aware of until about a year ago. So this top part here where you see disbursement load and the packaging load code, essentially, let's put it in terms that I think we all can understand. Say you have a merit scholarship that requires a student to be enrolled 12 credits, and that student only registers for 9 credits. Well, when it comes time to a memo or authorize the aid to go to the bill, if the student only is enrolled for 9 credits, they get a half-time bill in some cases. Well, what this will do is it won't memo that scholarship until they actually enroll in 12 credits. So it'll have an earlier dialogue with you. Instead of you having to babysit the process and cancel that loan or have a process that puts a requirement on a RARE Act to make sure they do enroll for more than the credits that they need to, or state grants that require the student to be enrolled for 12 credits. This, if you change it to prorate, and you can prorate certain aid to say if they're enrolled for, if it's merit scholarship, your policy says, yes, you only get a percentage of your eligibility based on your enrollment. Well, you can put in your percentage for 3/4 75, half-time load code is 50, and less than half-time is 0. And your merit scholarship will automatically memo and automatically disperse at the percentage of enrollment that student has. So if they get $10,000 and they're only enrolled for 9 credits, it's $7,500. Half-time, $5,000. Or you can take the different approach and says your merit scholarships do require everybody to be enrolled full-time, in which case there you'd make the 3/4, the half-time load, and the less than half-time load code at 0. So that way when it comes time to run your disbursement process, the aid won't memo to the bill because that student hasn't enrolled full-time. That way they actually have a conversation with you and guys and say, well, what's going on? Well, you haven't enrolled in enough credits to be eligible for this fund. Until you do so, you're not eligible for your merit scholarship. It's a nice little feature. It makes our jobs a little easier because those billing nightmares that sometimes come up. It also puts the responsibility back into the student's corner. Sometimes they sign scholarship agreement letters and they know that they are required to be enrolled in 12 credits. Certainly I understand that faculty hold up internships, but what this will do, instead of you becoming the owner, it makes that student go after the faculty member. You need to get this in earlier. Instead of hounding it down, again, it puts the responsibility back onto the student instead of you having to have broad shoulders to hold it. So that's just a nice little feature. Moving down onto that, the youth attending hours. For many of you who have multiple parts of term in a semester, and a student can enroll in any part of term possible, but you don't want to disperse aid until they have met all the requirements. Well, you can use the attending hours feature that will keep track of when that student starts class. If, for example, you are a community college and they can start a part of term 1 that starts on September 1 and it's only 3 credits, but their second part of term doesn't start until October 1, and that's when there will finally be 6 credits worth. Well, you can still award them the half-time eligibility. Pell will only pay at less than half-time on that September 1. When it comes time for October, and then we would disperse the remaining portion of eligibility up to half-time status. So again, you don't end up having to babysit that student. You can let the system, based on the registration information, determine when it should be dispersing aid. For those of you who run RSR, ENRL, the enrollment freeze, there's that new attending hours option on RSR, ENRL that updates ROA enroll, and there's an attending hours button. That's what it's updating. It's using that functionality to determine when it should be dispersing the either portion or all of that student's financial aid. I know we've all struggled with that a lot, especially community colleges or state schools or even private schools where students take forever to get their registration taken care of. This makes our jobs a lot easier in terms of having to ensure that we're not dispersing aid any earlier until that student has fulfilled the requirements to be eligible for at least half-time eligibility. Now going down more, this repeat rule functionality came out new. I believe it came out with 8.14.2 or 8.15, and now requires us to indicate what if the fund, what rule will it follow? Will it follow the repeat rule? Will it follow just the standard rule? And you can choose. Most of your federal aid funds should all follow the repeat rule, not the standard rule. And if you're not using this, I will say I used it for the first time this year, and it worked fantastically. It caught students that we would have never caught before, and it ensured that students really followed up, and if they were truly less than 9 credits, they enrolled for another 3 credits to make them at least half-time, including the second-time repeat. There is a override report, though. If you have students who take, for example, music or certain business courses that are the same course number, but they do take new material each year, you can put these courses into the financial aid override form here, and those courses won't affect this calculation for repeat or the standard rule. It's a nice, nice feature. I'm glad they finally did it. It makes our jobs a little easier. Then we go down to the use disbursement enrollment edits and recoup award when it was reduced. That use disbursement enrollment edits is a nice feature because if you run your disbursement process wide open, if the student isn't enrolled, it won't memo your aid. The trick here is, though, and I learned this the hard way, is that you need to have this checked off before you run disbursements for the first time for that semester. If you run disbursements and then go check the box off, that indicator will do nothing for your funds. It'll still memo and so forth. There's a certain indicator inside Banner and the functionality that ignores the indicator on that fund if you've already run disbursements for that semester. But this, again, will ensure that you're not going to disperse any aid to those students who weren't enrolled. It will ensure that memos don't show up on the bill so that way your bursar, if a student doesn't return but they still have a balance, your bursar will be calling you and saying, why does the student have a credit for this semester if they're not enrolling? Until you get to the point when you can run the cancel process, this will ensure that we don't have to follow up and babysit them again. The recoup award just allows you to add that fund if you decline a loan or a student cancels a portion of it, like SEOG or Perkins and so forth. If they decline that eligibility, it can add it back to the fund. So, for example, if you're only able to award, say, $20,000 in SEOG, if you've awarded $20,000 but then a student cancels their eligibility, it would add that amount that they canceled back to the $20,000 so that way you can award it. You wouldn't use the overcommitment amount, but you use the exact amount so you can replenish yourself once the fund is canceled. The ineligible before cutoff date, ineligible after cutoff date, if selected for verification and override general requirements. I'll deal with the top 2 here for a second, where it goes over this ineligible before and after the cutoff date. This is set up, the cutoff date is set off in RPR OPTS, and we'll get there. But eventually, this just means that, say you disperse aid, and the student then becomes selected for verification. You have a choice, and with the regulations, it gives you the choice. If you disperse aid and the selection comes after the award has been dispersed, you don't have to pull it back off the award, but you cannot disperse any subsequent aid until the verification is satisfied. Well, SunGuard gives you the option. It gives you the option to, if they get, you disperse aid before that cutoff date, you can back it off the account, or you can leave it on the account. Same thing with the cutoff date. If it happens, if aid's dispersed after the cutoff date, do you want to disperse any future aid or pull back the aid if a new issue comes on the student's account? That's all it really means. I don't know how many people actually use that. I'd be interested to hear how schools might be using that functionality to help them maintain compliance in those specific situations. The last item here is selective verification but not complete. That was a nice new feature they added, so that way if this fund doesn't require you to actually complete verification, this will allow you to override the verification requirement. So there's a lot on those 3 tabs, and I know we've covered a lot of content just there. Oh, oops, I've gone too far. What I'm going to do here is give everyone the opportunity to ask any questions on those first 3 tabs. So I'm going to unmute everyone's phone and give you the opportunity to ask any questions. So I've unmuted everyone's phones. Are there any questions about what we just covered? Nope? All right, good. We'll continue on this. The next few pieces will go a lot faster, but there was a lot of content to fill up on those. We also have not got any questions on the chat, so feel free again if you have any questions to shoot questions there. All right, so what we have here, the budget and the detail code. This next one we're going to cover, and this was a new thing. I worked with a school in Florida this past year who just finally implemented Banner from going to a legacy system here. That you can make your fund specific based on a particular budget component. So say you want this fund to only cover 50% of this budget component. RAs, for example, this is a very good one. Say you have an RA that gets 50% of a certain charge or a certain budget item. You can actually make this fund only disperse 50% of whatever that budget is. A little more difficult on the budget side, but algorithmic budgeting now, it might make our lives a little easier if we adjust our costs on the budget to reflect that. I personally like this last one here, which is the detail code one, because that looks exactly at what the student is charged. So if you want to cover a percentage of a certain detail code for, again, housing, I'll use RAs as an example, you'll know that you'll cover 50% or 100% of whatever that fund is, that charge is on the student account. Makes it a little easier, less babysitting, because I know many of you, or I have done it, if it's an RA, you don't know if they're living in a cheaper housing assignment. So you put a flat fee out there and then wait to get a list from the registrar or a list from the student life office to update what the reward is going to be. This allows you to put a flat amount out there, but it will only disperse whatever the student is charged. Nice feature. This is very similar to if you guys use the exemption process in Banner, the TSA EXPT. This is kind of mimicking that functionality on RFR management. Now the next two, tracking and messaging. I like these two, and this goes back to the whole disclosure piece of it. With tracking codes, you can, again, attach anything you want to a fund, and you can make it a fund-specific requirement, so that way if that requirement's not in, it won't disperse that fund until it's resolved. I'll use example, state grants. If you need to collect residency requirements, if there's something you need to collect for them, this is where you can actually say, oh, we're going to award this fund, but we're not going to disperse it until that requirement has been satisfied. And again, you can make it only add it to the award, or we can use loans, for example, where you're required to do entrance on a promissory note. As soon as that fund is added, it will either add it when the student accepts the award, or when you add it if you determine that you want to award it, add the requirement when the student's offered the fund. Then messages here. We do a lot of messaging to students, and in many cases we either hard code it into an award letter, or or have the billions of different messages codes on row of message in order to do that. What this does, it ties that message code directly to the fund, and you can build a variable so that way when you print your award, you will only print the messages associated with that particular student. Makes our jobs a little easier. It provides the opportunity for you to reduce the text that you would have on your award letters in the event that you have to have a variety of things. But say it's a state grant and you want to hard code it in there, or if it's a loan, for example, and you hard code the loan message that you need to do an entrance on a promissory note into your award letter. Well, this gives you the option. If you're not going to award a loan to a student because they're a full ride athlete or a full ride scholar and they're not going to get loans, well, why do they need to see that message? It just clutters it up, makes the award too dense. You can use this functionality to tie messages, and it's easier to inform the students of their requirements. Now, that's just the fun piece of it. We're going to start getting into the real nitty-gritty here and packaging setup. And the way I like to think about them is, again, I use a scenario of different buckets of different students. So all these packaging groups are buckets, and we need to make sure we assign the funds to those particular buckets. We need to determine and start going down the list of what packaging rules are we going to assign to each one of those funds. Do we want to have a specific requirement that's going to award a percentage of that award using an algorithmic rule to a student? For example, we'll use state grants in Massachusetts. They use a very similar formula to Pell. Where the EFC is between a certain range, they get a certain amount for Pell. If it's between 0, they get, I think it may be 2,400. So you're able to use algorithmic packaging here to assign the right value to the student. And then we can use this again to use the equity indicator you saw in RFR management, is that packaging targets. You can use percentage of need versus total dollar amount. How are we going to get there? So again, those package groups are just different buckets that we're going to have. They're going to go through a funnel. How we get there is this is an example of all those different kind of buckets. We have 4 different levels that have different need category, and this all indicates different levels of percentage of need that we're willing to meet on those particular students. So you set them up in RTV, PGRP, and I totally recommend getting a big notepad and you put it on the wall and you think about all the different buckets that you have. And then within those buckets, then we have to say, okay, how are we going to meet those particular pieces so that we award them correctly? So once we do the buckets, start looking at RPR ops. How are you going to package those particular students? Are you going to use estimated enrollment? Are you going to use an estimated EFC? Is it okay to package a student if a C flag exists? Again, up in the air in terms of if you want to do that. Do you automatically award the additional unsub? What kind of source are you going to use for the awarding history? Is it NSLDS? Is it going to be Banner? Do you take into consideration exemptions in contracts? For example, tuition remission individuals. Who's going to maintain that, and how are you going to put it onto the resource screen in order to do so? Do you do third-party contracts? So forth. That disbursement option there is going to help as well to determine how you want to disperse certain aid. That's cutoffs. You enter the cutoff dates to back off awards. So go back to the bottom portion of the disbursement tab on RFR management. This is where you're going to set up those cutoff dates by term. Do you want to use a disbursement option that says full-time, use adjusted hours? The different options are there. This is where typically I put in the add drop date. Any changes that happen after the add drop date is what we're going to use to determine if we're going to back off or leave aid there. Typically, I say if it's before the add drop date and we dispersed aid up to that period, I back off the aid because at that point we haven't even done the freeze yet. It depends on when you're going to disperse aid to. This last tab here, the top portion is really for Pell, and you can use the indicator that says if Pell is awarded higher, but the EFC indicates it should be lower, it'll pay the lesser of the 2 amounts. If you use less than half-time Pell cost of attendance, the Pell crossover no longer exists, so that's I think will go away with the next iteration. But then you have these other options. The Pell to pay Pell if the SAR EFC and the system EFC match in the same cell. That I like because if you're going to do verification and send out corrections, this won't pay Pell until you get that correction back. If you want to delete Pell awards, if you decide the student did a FAFSA and they initially qualified for a 0 EFC, but lo and behold, when you actually get the verifying documents, they don't qualify for Pell at all. And I'm sure that doesn't happen for anybody other than me. This will capture that. You can either use NSLDS to award Pell. Now, I think with the next iteration, and then we'll all find out in a couple weeks when we go to FSA, how the Department of Ed is going to capture this information on the FAFSA application, so we'll know how much Pell has been used, especially for our transfer students. Then down at the bottom is where we're going to determine how we want to award and how we want to disperse our aid. Many of you, if you're a private school or a state school, probably assume full-time enrollment. But it's nice to know here that you might want to end up changing them as the semester goes on. Community colleges, for example, as the semester goes on, you might want to change it from adjusted hours so that way Pell will add into that summer term automatically when you recalculate Pell. So these two things are really critical because the awarding option will then feed into your disbursement option. How do you want to make sure you minimize those particular pieces when it comes up? Once you've kind of gone through those pieces, then you're going to take those buckets. So I'm going to use an example, that Pres 1 that we saw on RTV, PGRP, and assign all these pieces on here. And as you can see, we have a litany in this particular scenario of all these different scholarships, these state grant funds. We use a couple of algorithmic rules here, and I suggest trying to think about using algorithmic rules. The reason why there are so many funds in this is because this school has decided that they want to award endowed funds as part of their packaging process. Rather than having someone, and you probably have a dedicated staff member if you do have a large enough office and a big enough endowment, to just do endowed. Well, you can build these awarding rules that will help you select those students, and you don't have to spend the time having to go through your long Excel spreadsheets and filtering them based on certain criteria. It does take a little bit of time to get there, but once it's built, you can keep on rolling it from year to year. So think algorithms when you're actually looking at how to build your packaging groups there. Now, the minimum and maximum amount are just that. They're the min and maximum amount. You can do percentage of need there. You can use a particular formula that you want to use. Excuse me one second. I'm going to sneeze. Maybe not. If you're an institutional methodology school, you can choose I instead of F. These algorithms that we have here, you can set particular algorithms that you want. If there's one that you're going to use for freshman versus sophomore, if you're going to use one for SEOG versus a different one, you can slice and dice them, and that's a nice part about that algorithmic rule that's out there. So I'm going to give you an example here for our Prez fund. Even though it's on that selection of that Prez 1, we have a rule, for them. So if the student doesn't qualify for this fund, we're not going to add it to them. All right. This requires a particular academic rating. It requires a certain need level, and so forth. And if the student doesn't meet this criteria, it doesn't award this fund. They provide a really, especially the disbursement rule options as well, provide additional security to ensure that fund is awarded correctly and dispersed correctly. Now, I'm showing this because I don't know if anyone we want, but this is a auto package. And what this does here is we've created this rule to say only award one endowed fund per student. So all the funds that you see there are need-based endowed funds. And that makes it a little easier to award them. So, but we only want to award one endowed fund per student. And we don't want to give that student, award all those funds there. So this SQL, this rule here, looks at if they already have one endowed fund, it doesn't award it again. If an endowed fund doesn't exist, it'll award that next fund up to whatever is available in the budget, and so forth. So I figured I'd share for you that it's easier if you're going to find a bunch of need-based funds or funds that don't have any major restrictions on there. It gives you a lot of opportunity to do so. Oops, too far. Sorry. Now, this last one, RPR, PCKR. I don't want to be fresh, but I call this the Pecker form because that's the acronym. But this is where I assign those different values to each of the buckets. And if you want to meet in this Prez 1 packaging group, we're going to meet percentage of gross need. If you want to do a percentage of the budget amount, that's where we're going to identify that piece. Okay, and again, it works fantastic. Now, for your returning population, if you want to level fund them, and you want to ensure that, yes, that they still fall into Prez 1, but as a sophomore, we level fund them up to the same dollar amount that we had in the year in which they came in, you can use both the gross need percentage, okay, and where you see this amount and that third block down in the same column, you can put the max dollar amount that packaging group will go up to. So it'll go up to 80% of that student's remaining need up to that dollar amount. That way you can ensure that the student doesn't get more money than they're required to get. Okay. Nice little feature again, and I've used it a lot. Again, I have 4 schools that are using it right now. One using enrollment research, one using No Levitz. and one using their own institutional policy, and it's working amazingly, especially on those first two students who really have tested it on. One school has gone into their second year using that policy as well, and the sophomores are working fantastic as well. So, it takes a little bit to get everybody in there, especially if you have different policies, but it's a matter of taking your policy and slicing and dicing it. And yes, it can take some time to do it, but it will pay dividends in the long run once you get past it. All right, now before we go any further, we did get a question sent to us about the, let me read the question here for everyone. You mentioned that if the fund is having an issue, it will lock automatically. I'm running into this right now in my test environment. Can you repeat or put this in an email? So if a fund locks, the easiest way to identify this, when you run your disbursement process and you look at your disbursement report, it'll tell you that the fund is locked. What that means is that there's not enough money in your fund. So you have to go to RFI BUDG, and you'll see there's an available amount, an overcommitment amount. You're probably going to see negative numbers there. And if you look in there, it just means how much you're short on those funds in order to continue dispersing the remaining amount of money. All right, and it's going to be looking at the budget allocated, what's remaining in that budget allocated item. It's probably going to be negative. So if it's really over what you have, you either have to swap out that money with institutional money or increase the budget, then run disbursements, and the money will pay. All right. If you look at that disbursement lock on that fourth tab of RFR MGMT, you'll see there's a lock in there probably for the semester that you're running. It'll probably fall, either like 2012-01 or 2012-15, whatever kind of term that you use for fall. You'll probably see that there with the lock button checked off. Okay? I hope that answers your question. You can certainly ask another question if you'd like. Before we go into messaging here, again, I'm going to open up the phone lines here to allow you guys to ask any questions if you would like to. So give me 1 second. Attendees, select, and unmute. All right, everybody is unmuted. Is there any questions about this piece that we've gone over? And hopefully for that individual, I did answer the question.
Thank you, Ray. Yes, you did.
Could you go back over and repeat where you have repeated on the form for the management form, RFR management?
Sure. Let me get there.
Okay.
Well, I didn't realize how far I went. All right, and you're talking there, right? Is that the form you're talking about for repeat? Mm-hmm. Was there a question about the repeat functionality? I'm going to assume not. All right. If there isn't a question about the repeat component, we'll continue. Or if you want to shoot us that message in the chat feature, we'll try to answer that for you. All right. Are there any other questions? All right. I'm going to mute everybody again. If you have any questions, don't hesitate. Go ahead and certainly send the chat to us. It's great, too, if you want to put your chat out to the group, which you can. That would be a good opportunity for everybody to see what kind of questions you have. And, again, don't be afraid to ask any questions. It'll be great. Okay, there is a question I got from there's a process to roll funds from year to year, and we can set up those scholarship requirements. where are those requirements set up, and what is the process that I mentioned? Okay. The process is, and I'll type it in here for everybody so that way you don't have to guess what it is. Attendees. The job is RPRAROL. All right. That is a job that allows you to roll awards from year to year. All right. Now, I'm going to fast forward here in a couple of pages because I had the screen up to put where you put those requirements on there. The requirements are done on ROR Rule, ROR RULE. This allows you to, and again, this second page is more for experts. There's a first page there where you can just put in the requirements that you want to do that. And so that's where you're going to do that. But the job to run it, RPRAROL, the form to create the requirements on that fund is ROR Rule. Did I answer the question?
I need to be willing to come in.
All right, great. Any other questions?
Yeah, we don't know.
All right, perfect. Give me 1 second. I'm going to mute everybody. Oh, hold on. I do have another question. Let's see here. The question is, can I go over the using attending hours in RFR management and Pell? Are you saying that if you check that box, then Banner will automatically manage a late start update process? The answer is yes. That is exactly what I'm saying. All right. It's not so much for Pell. Pell is one of the funds that does it automatically, but it will only disperse the percentage of Pell based on when that student's enrolled. So I'll use that same scenario where if the student starts their first part of term in term 1, all right, and they're only enrolled for 3 credits, and the second part of term starts October 30th, okay, and they get them to 6 credits, that first 30 days, Banner's only going to pay less than half-time Pell on that particular student. If they don't start, and your question here is the late start, if they don't start until October 1, even though your term started September 1, Banner won't pay that until October 1. All right? That's what the using attending hours feature is. It is dovetailed, too, with the RSR ENRL process, the L freeze process. All right. I wish I had a slide here to pull up the ROA Enroll component for you. But if you look at ROA Enroll, that's ROAENRL, there's an attending hours tab on there, and you can track when that student starts. If it's a late start class, Banner won't start it, dispersing aid. Now, you can use that feature that allows you to disperse up to 10 days before the start of the term for a late start, and you would put a 10 in there, and it would disperse 10 days prior to the start of term. But that's up to you in terms of how you want to set it up. But to answer your question, yes, that is exactly what the attending hours do.
Do you think of any...
Did I answer the question?
Beyond just saying, okay, you'd be supervising Caitlin.
Are there any others? Any questions?
I mean, we got to give her something else. It's also like welcomed by her.
I want to say these are some great questions. Thanks for asking them. All right. I think we're good now. If there are no other questions, I'm going to mute everybody again, and then I think we'll be able to finish this presentation. I know we're running a little over time, so I apologize. So I will try to wrap this up as soon as I can. So we're going to mute everybody right now, and we'll finish with this presentation. Okay, so the last part of this is going to be all about messaging here. The award level messages, fund level messages. We talked about terms and conditions and I talked about Title IV authorizations. I won't go over those too much because we did it in the first session, and if you missed any components of it, feel free to review the webinar recording, and we go over how the setup looks at, what the forms are, and so forth in that first session. So the award level messages are done in ROA message, and I like these a lot because you are able to, one, put standard messages in there where you see the message code box, or you could put a free form message to that student. This allows you to really tailor the message to the student, the award to that student, so that way every student's unique, and you want to be able to address their particular issues here. So say it's a professional judgment and you're only able to do certain components of it. Well, you can either have a standard message to ensure that everybody who's able to do PJs uses the same message, or you can put a specialized message in there that says, you know what, sincerely, we hope that your mom gets better. We understand that it's difficult when a member gets ill. We have taken into consideration some of the medical expenses that you guys have incurred during that period. Then you can pull that message into the email or the award letter that you send to those students and let them know that this is what's going on. Or you can deny their appeal and let them know. So if you're not using row message, it's a great opportunity. This does pull on banner self-service on the reward piece, and they're able to see all the reward messages out there. The other one on RFR management, we did cover over this, that message tab. Again, it's a really good opportunity for you to just deliver more information to the students if it's fund specific. We did discuss this one last time too, ROAR message, and this allows you to attach other messages to a particular tracking requirement. You can attach it to a budget code. So, for example, I'm sure all of you get this question if you display your cost of attendance, that why is the cost of attendance so high? I can't believe you guys charge so much when your cost of attendance includes non-billed items. Well, you can actually attach a message to that budget code and let the family know that that is not a billed item. This is only used to determine the cost of attendance for that student, the maximum amount of eligibility they would qualify for. Hopefully that will reduce some of the questions that you get from families when they see that cost of attendance or graduate students, and that way you can also display this is a direct cost to you, and the college will bill you for these items. So you can attach longer messages to students based on particular requirements that are out there. But it's, the ability to deliver that would be nice without having to really modify a lot of that stuff on self-service. So we just show the screen print here, but this is where we do those Title IV questions. One, you can ask the FERPA question to a student, and again, this would update RPA-INFO. But these are the two Title IV authorizations where we ask the students once a year if they receive financial aid and it exceeds their charges, do they want us to use those funds to cover non-education related expenses, parking fee, library fine, whether that be health insurance, whatever it might be, we collect that information. The other one is do they want us to hold on to their refund? You could ask, do you want us to apply your credit to a prior balance if it's $200 or less? All this information can then be used to roll to student accounts using the job TVP REQA. Reduces paper, it ensures better integrity, and it requires everybody who's a financial aid recipient to answer these questions. So it in a way, it safeguards you from an institutional piece where you're collecting all this information. And guess what? You guys are going to work hand in hand with student accounts to ensure that compliance is being made. That's my soapbox thing. I think it's a good thing. Then this is where you're going to build those web text rules. This is one of the examples where we can display a certain terms and conditions about bookstore vouchers. But if you click on that down arrow where it says self-service tab, you can display anything on any tab and any page on a financial aid self-service. So if you want to display something on the general tab about your office hours, if you want to display something on the special consideration tab, you can do so by using this piece, and you can only have to show it to particular students. That SQL rules is where you can develop a rule that says only students who meet this particular criteria will see this message. It gives you the opportunity to really tailor that award message to the student. So with that said, I'm pulling up some self-service pieces, and this is not an issue with self-service. I have taken out some pieces to protect the school who was gracious enough to help display some of this information for us. So this is real-time. This is a production, out-of-the-box, no frills, self-service component. Okay, and what I have in front of you, that's the tabs for the award letter. Some are displayed, some aren't displayed. And the Title IV questions that I just showed you on the ROR WBQA show up on this form. Okay, we also use the RPAARSC form to display to the student outside scholarship information. So that they can stop guessing whether or not that scholarship is received if you use a generic message. But students would go here first and answer your Title IV questions. At the bottom of it, and you can see the far right side where you see the scroll bar, at the bottom of it, it records for the student. This student has answered the questions already, so otherwise it would display here like it does with the resource. You'd see the individual questions and the drop-down box to answer yes or no. If you scroll down on this, the student retains the answer, so that way they can come into your office and say, I didn't do that. Well, you could log out the self-service with that student. You could pull up RPA, INFO, and show the student, well, yeah, you did. Here's your answer, and here's the date that you did it on. The next tab is the terms and conditions. This is the RORWTXT, where we have built all those terms and conditions into the self-service module here that cover bookstore vouchers, how direct loans are out there, they're requiring the email, and so forth, to make sure that student understands this. And part of the award letter process, we are requiring students to acknowledge they understand these components in order to move to the last step here, which is the Accept Award Offer tab. This, when they acknowledge their terms and conditions, it automatically satisfies the requirement on RARAC. And if you remember on RARAC, there's a far right-hand column that kind of gives you who updated that record. Well, this new status code of W, it tells you it was done via the web. And that way you know if that requirement's been satisfied and you see a W, you know the student did it. This is the last tab here that talks about the Accept Award Offer information. And this is where the student will log out online and provide, determine whether or not they want to accept those pieces. You'll see here where if there's a hyperlink, or the item is blue where it says Fund, that means the student can click on it and obtain more information. Nice feature. They can get a lot of information about their eligibility. I had just did a on-site training with a school yesterday, and they were talking about making sure students knew about the GPA requirements, and this was a South Carolina school about South Carolina Life. Well, when you click on that, it pulls up the GPA requirements for renewal. It talks about how the life scholarship is calculated, and so forth. So students can now retrieve a lot of this information without having to pick up the phone and do so. It's a cultural change, though. You have to make sure students are willing to do it. And this is the back part. See, students, if you click on the Award Offer tab, so I'll go back here for a second. See the Award Overview tab right here? This is what this is. Students are able to click in that and actually print out their award letter. And that award letter then will have all the terms and conditions, which you see at the bottom portion of the screen, attached to their award letter. It has the school's name, it has the school's logo on it, and it alleviates the need. It's certainly not a PDF, I will say that, and that's a limitation here. But it allows them to print it out and obtain this so if their parents want information, they can get it. And then I wanted to display this to you as well. This is the requirements screen, and as you can see, anything will hyperlink. They're able to hyperlink either to the form, hyperlink to the actual website, and so forth. But this also shows to you that far right-hand column where you see instructions, that's where you're able to display the additional instructions to those students. I don't like the icon, and we're working on trying to fix that icon, but for the most part, this allows the student to click on it and get more information about why you're asking for this document, what does it mean, and so forth. Now, that's self-service, and that's how those messaging pieces work on there. It's a lot quicker than what we have done but it does enhance how we interact with those students. So what I'm going to do here is unmute everybody, allow you to ask any questions that you have about this presentation. So do you have, are there any questions out there that anybody would like to ask? Phones are open. Are there any questions? And if you need to absorb what we discussed, don't hesitate at all. Feel free to email myself or Russ. You can call us, you can IM us, you can get us somehow if you have questions. So if there aren't any questions, I'll give you. Anyone have any questions before we finish?
Well, it was higher.
What, was that a question?
I have one question.
Oh, sure.
I just was wondering, I never received the PowerPoint. Did you say you were going to email it out?
I did add it to the registration, so when I added it, it was going to automatically send it out to the attendees. If you didn't get it, you'll get it momentarily.
Okay, thank you.
You'll get the URL with all the recording.
Thanks.
Now, are there any other questions? All right, I got one sent to me. Making sure I understand that. It seems like you could do it. Yeah, I could do an entire presentation exactly on how the row message and how messaging in general interacts with self-service. That you're totally right. Someone's just commenting on how much we now have the ability to deliver some information to students versus using paper. And the more we think about it, the more you investigate into it, he's absolutely true. So if there aren't any, I think the big thing is that we lost a few people in the that are registered right now. There are actively 29 individuals logged into the presentation still. So without further ado, what we'll do is, Russ, there are 29 people logged into the system. Pick a number between 1 and 29. 17. 17, so...
You logged in, Rhonda, or you or me?
All right. Well, the winner is, we'll be in touch with them. But Marta Smith at University of Washington, University of Mary Washington. Sorry, was selected to get up to 2 free hours of consulting if you want it. So I'll be in touch with you. I'll shoot you an email, and I'll call you later today if you're still in the office. But congratulations. I hope that this session provided some helpful information to you. But are there any questions before we sign off for the weekend?
Thanks, Ray. Thank you, Russ.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, folks. Have a great weekend. Thanks for attending.